Hello everybody, welcome to the NPA 12 finals stream. I'm today joined by Aaron Cybertron Zhang. And today we selected 3 matches from the finals between Samurais and Cruisers to watch together and comment. And it features some pretty good players, I'd say. What do you think?
Yeah, really excited. I think all these matches feel like matches we could see at the World Championships. Just some of the best players around right now. And yeah, I know having played an NPA many years ago, it's very difficult to, team tournaments in particular can be really stressful. So definitely eager to watch these games.
Yeah, and considering that the situation right now between Cruisers and Samurais is pretty close, should we look at it maybe? Okay. They're 2-2 tied right now, so these are the last 3 matches of these finals. And yeah, so far it's been 2-0 every match, but let's see if we can take a look at some 2-1, very close, maybe good stuff mirrors that take so long to play out and are just so I want to say something positive, but they're actually so torturing for the players that play the mirror. So let's see if we can take a look at one of these mirrors, and let's jump into the first 2 players. So we have Adi and Zelda. I'm going to let you introduce Adi since you're American and you're a fellow nationals.
Yeah, Adi is a really incredible player. I feel like he's had a very consistent run, especially at the regional level across this season and the last season. Ended up, of course, top cutting Orlando, which was the biggest regionals ever in the history of the game, a couple of months ago. And I believe he's already qualified for Worlds this year as well. So yeah, I've had my eye out on him for the last 2 seasons. I think, he was part of a really interesting team building group, especially last year. And yeah, he's just performed incredibly well across the regional level. And I'm eager to see what team he's brought to this tournament in particular in this finals.
Yeah, and he's paired up against Zelda, a player we should all know about, Australian. He got finals in 2017 at Worlds, lost to Ryota Otsubo. But yeah, pretty consistent run. And about that tournament in particular, I remember him being a very strong builder because his team was a huge medical. And let's see if he will be able to do the same this year, considering he is testing since last year, I would say, with Jude Lee. That is a very, very strong player that one-tricks a team and perfects it in every way. So I'm curious to see something from him this season. But other than the finals in 2017, he has won 5 regionals and he has cut countless regionals in Australia. So I would jump straight into the team preview and let's see what they have brought to this finals. So a matchup that I would say is that torturing I was talking about earlier.
Yeah, you're talking about the Palafin balance. I mean, these teams have been everywhere going into EUIC. It's been a couple of weeks since EUIC, but of course they finished first and second, kind of different variations of Palafin balance. And so Adi here is not running the Ting Lu, which you often do see on these compositions, whereas Zelda, of course, is running it. And yeah, I definitely have my eye out on that King Gambit in particular. I think it's really valuable into the opposing Intimidate. And like you said, these matchups are definitely very long and drawn out. I think one interesting thing is always do you actually bring Amoonguss, right? Amoonguss can be really good, but often these teams have a lot of good anti-Amoonguss answers, whether it be your own Amoonguss or a Grass Tower or safety goggles. And so let's see how this gets started.
Yeah, Palafin and Flowermane coming out by Zelda and King Gambit. As you were talking about that slot, it's on the lead, but no Intimidate on Zelda's side.
Yeah, I think what's interesting here is that there's actually the Palafin in the back for Adi, right? But I think the Gambit right now is definitely a little bit threatened by offense, right? One thing you do have to respect when you go up against Palafin as a lead is the Water Terra immediately, right before it even transforms. But Arcanine here not really going to risk taking any damage and is just going to swap out to conserve Intimidate for later on and make sure he doesn't just, get hit by a Water type attack. And yeah, Palafin stays in.
Yeah, and we see a Terra type, so probably it's going to be that Palafin, and it is. So you called that correctly, and Amoonguss coming in kind of for free, unless this is a double up onto that King Gambit slot. that I am not sure what is going to do. Okay, it's a protect, so Amoonguss should come in pretty safely. The best that Zelda could have gone for is Shadow Ball and Wave Crash, but no, Moonblast just crashing onto that protect of King Gambit. And Wave Crash, yeah, there was the double up, so he kind of predicted the switch out of Arcanine, but not the protect.
Yeah, I can definitely see what Zelda's going for there, right? The idea is King Gambit probably feels like it's in a pretty safe position, like, oh, you've intimidated Palafin. Palafin normally wants to switch out there. So Zelda tries to make an aggressive read, doesn't get it. Adi gets Amoonguss into a really safe position. And I think now if you're Zelda, this is kind of tricky, right? Because Amoonguss can just spore either slot. Of course, you could switch both Pokemon out potentially, right? And switching in Amoonguss, for example, would be really valuable. Switching in something with Goggles is really valuable as well. But yeah, Adi's definitely got to be feeling a little bit better relative to Zelda after that turn 1. And there's Amoonguss coming in.
Yeah, Amoonguss comes on the field right now. And King Gambit is switching out as well for that Arcanine, I believe. Yeah, it is the Arcanine. So great repositioning for Adi, bringing Arcanine in front of that Amoonguss that cannot use the Terra type since Palafin used it on turn 1. But Wave Crash here trying to pick that Arcanine on switching, and it does. It's at -2, but the damage is consistent. And let's see if there is a Pollen Puff. No, there is a Spore on the Amoonguss, and that is so bad for Adi. So nice play by Zelda predicting that Arcanine coming in.
Yeah, of course, in that position, the Amoonguss could have just gone for Rage Powder last turn, but Zelda decides, you know what, I'm just going to stay in. I'm going to keep targeting the King Gambit slot. Palafin here ends up, just not eating up a Spore either, so even though last turn things looked really scary, I think the positioning has definitely worked out a little bit better, especially getting that Wave Crash into the Arcanine. But, one thing that's really interesting about these matchups is even if you get a lot of damage off, a single Pollen Puff can of course heal it all the way back up, so you have to be very mindful of that, right? And right now the upside for Adi is of course he still has Terra conserved to his advantage, but you do have to deal with this kind of passive pressure from Amoonguss with Spore right now, and of course King Gambit is really great for that because it has that Lumberry.
Yeah, and King Gambit is coming in to probably take that Spore, but Palafin once again stays on the field. It does not want to proc that ability, and Wave Crash does some little bit of damage to that King Gambit. Being at -2, I expected the damage to be not that high, but Palafin is going to sleep after 3 turns of it being on the field with the Terra type and not in his hero form. So this is not a gameplay that we see that often from Palafin.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, I can't remember the last time I've seen a baby Palafin, stay on the field for the entirety of the battle after tarrying and all these intimidates. But King Gambit finally in a better position now. We know that it's the Swords Dance variant with Lumberry as well. And so there's a lot of potential plays that you can make with it in not just this turn, but kind of the subsequent turns as well. I think the tricky decision if you're Zelda is basically, do I actually stay in with Palafin? Because if so, you risk a Spore going into that slot once again. But Zelda's saying, you know what, I am just going to transform, and of course Arcanine a really great switch in here. But it will actually activate that Defiant on King Gambit. And so King Gambit might be able to snowball this relatively quickly in the subsequent turns.
Yeah, and that Palafin switching out in this turn means that it has to sleep at least 1 turn. But yeah, King Gambit just switching out. It doesn't want to take that Spore. Adi probably wants to exploit this turn to go for a self-Pollen Puff since it's the safest position. That Palafin having to sleep at least 1 turn and Arcanine being safety goggles, this is a very safe switch-in. And yeah, the Spore comes out from that Amoonguss safety goggles, saving this Arcanine from being put to sleep.
Yeah, I do think there was the potential to, maybe staying with King Gambit there and go for a Swords Dance, right? Pollen Puff would be able to heal you back up as well, but now it's kind of an awkward position where it's both players have Arcanine and Amoonguss out. No damage has really been done. Right now, both players have opted for very similar Pokemon, Palafin, Arcanine, and Amoonguss as well. The one main advantage that Adi has going for him is that he has not used his Terra yet, right? And so yeah, the Palafin can come in. You do risk, however, a potential Will-O-Wisp read at any point, and Palafin getting burnt right now would be a complete disaster. So yeah, both players are just really vying for positioning. I do feel like King Gambit was actually pretty well positioned last turn, but of course you would have never guaranteed that Arcanine was going to come out. So here's Palafin coming out right now, and the switches just continue.
Yeah, and that's kind of how you have to play these mirrors out. And Palafin coming in its hero form after 6 turns, I feel like. And it is pretty safe on the field right now, because he's already asleep, so it doesn't have to worry about a Spore threat. But, it's in his hero form against a Palafin that is in its baby form. So we have to see how this Palafin in the back comes into play.
Yeah, definitely. I think from Audie's perspective, you of course could just switch the Palafin back out right now out of fear of Will-O-Wisp from the opposing side. You could go out into Arcanine, intimidate the opposing end. The question is, like, when does the damage actually start coming out from Audie's end, right? Because it's like Amoonguss isn't really going to do much damage. Arcanine isn't going to do much damage. Arcanine honestly can't do much in general between Will-O-Wisp and Flare Blitz as well. And so, yeah, like the main attackers that Audie kind of has to rely on are the Kingambit and the Palafin. But, by switching out the Kingambit earlier, you're kind of in this awkward spot where you don't want to just switch it in immediately because you risk a Flare Blitz going into that slot. Of course, Terra would be your solution around it. And so it's kind of this awkward dancing of, like, switching, but when does Audie start actually distributing damage, right? But he's just kind of waiting for the ideal position to get his Pokemon out, and the switches continue.
And that's kind of stalling the opponent out, and you have to position yourself in order to win a timer, usually in these mirrors, unless you play with the Kingambit, which Audie isn't quite doing in this BO3, but Palafin right now taking his first turn of sleep and Arcanine going back to full health. And this is a null position unless Palafin wakes up and goes for something like Substitute.
Yeah, I think, the Kingambit you've got to be thinking about is a really good Pokemon in this matchup, right? I'm sure Audie at this point realized, oh, maybe if I stayed in with it earlier, I'd be in a really good spot, whereas right now it's still just kind of passive. Now, the upside for Audie, of course, is that Zelda has committed that Terra. And you still have Amoonguss out on the field. Neither Palafin nor Amoonguss on the other side really threaten Amoonguss at all. So you can slowly start launching attacks. And finally, I think we're going to see some damage after multiple turns in this battle.
Yeah, Rage Powder on Audie's side, but that Amoonguss on Zelda's side is going to take that Flare Blitz on his face. Not too much damage. I expected it to do more. It's very, very defensive physically, I think. And Citrus Berry bringing it back to like 65% of HP. And I wonder what that Amoonguss has done in this turn. And it is a Spore to cover for some kind of switching of Palafin probably, but that didn't happen. And Amoonguss took a lot of damage and consumed his item.
Yeah, this is just one thing that makes it so awkward when you both have Amoonguss. Like, we were talking about this before the battle even started, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, do you bring Amoonguss? You kind of feel like you have to because the redirection is so good. But when your opponent also has Goggles, Arcanine, and Amoonguss on the other end, it's like just so awkward, right? But I do think Audie having the Terra advantage still is a pretty big deal. And I think Palafin right now is just kind of in an awkward position as well. But basically, I think both players don't really feel that confident in switching out, right? Yeah, I think Gambit is kind of the tool to break through all of this. I'm glad that Audie is finally bringing it back out, and we'll see if he can finally, start getting some damage off or set up with the Swords Dance.
Yeah, I don't think... Okay, I was gonna say, if Spore came out, it's not that good for Audie since the Lumberry would have been eaten, but that's not the case. And this is a great switching, actually, since the Arcanine coming into that Amoonguss is just going to boost this Kingambit. And at +1, with this Rage Powder defending him from that Wave Crash, Kingambit is going to put in a lot of work here, in my opinion. And Wave Crash, with the Terra type, it's at -1, I think, so I expect it to go for 40% damage. Yeah, that's the case. And Amoonguss is very safe here, considering that he has the Terra Water, and Kingambit can get rid of his Steel type.
Exactly, yeah. I think Kingambit finally positioned again, and it's gotten that attack boost. So I think now if you're Audie, maybe you start considering actually dealing some damage, right? Like you said, you could Terra the Kingambit. It's got the Lumberry as well, so you don't have to worry about getting burnt immediately. Moongus here could consider a switch into the Arcanine in the back. Of course, at this point, Zelda's already revealed that he's willing to go for, those Wave Crash predictions, but it looks like, yep, that is the consideration. And yeah, Kingambit here, I think, has a lot of different options. I think Protect is kind of the safest just to make sure you get this Arcanine in, get it Intimidate off. But you do risk, Zelda going for some repositioning or even, going for a Wave Crash prediction onto the Arcanine.
I think that Audie would be pretty fine with Wave Crash on Arcanine since Amoonguss would come back in with both Pokemons at -1 on the opposing side. So yeah, Flare Blitz comes into what was the Amoonguss slot, and let's see if he doubled up. No, Haze! Ooh, pretty wise. I expected it to be Substitute, but yeah, that's Polchua's team, not Agati. So yeah, he didn't have Substitute. Very, very wise in this turn.
Yeah, that's honestly one of the best hazes I've seen in a non-like Dondozo matchup.
Yeah.
Like, not only did you get rid of King Gambit's attack, but you also got rid of the attack drops on Arcanine and Palafin. So that was the risk of playing a little bit more passively. And King Gambit being at +1 versus neutral honestly makes a big difference in this matchup, especially because last turn, you know, I think it had the ability to potentially go for a Dark Terra. You have that attack boost, you have the Dark boost as well, and finally start going for a Kowtow Cleave. And so I felt like the positioning really favored Adi, but that turn being a little bit passive and Zelda making an amazing play with that haze makes things a little bit more even. So the switches are going to continue right now.
Yeah, and Palafin coming in for Adi in its zero form on turn 1000. And let's see, because if it got on the field...
King Gambit, don't leave the
it switched
field.
out as well. If Palafin came into a wave crash, it's not that good. But yeah, Jet Punch. Okay, Jet Punch on that King Gambit. Okay. And yeah, with this double up, yeah, Zelda was granting himself a KO in this turn because King Gambit just protected. And even if it went for the Terra type, Jet Punch plus Flare Blitz, I think would have been enough to KO. So very, very good offensive turn for Zelda. First one of the game, I would say. And yeah, let's see if this King Gambit coming in right now can like solve the matchup, but I don't think so.
Yeah, I just like love that haze from earlier, you know. I just thought that was so smart because it not only reduced the offensive pressure from Gambit, but also like being able to get rid of the Intimidates is such a big deal. So yeah, really, really nicely played. Great turn there. We finally see a knockout. You know, now the thing is, yeah, you can start pressuring the Arcanine slot because, of course, there is the threat of Jet Punch onto that slot. So Arcanine here, I think, you know, you could very conceivably see it switching into Amoonguss here. So part of the question is, do you expect the switch? You know, you do risk like a potential Flare Blitz or Will-O-Wisp here if Arcanine does just stay in and you don't end up Jet Punching. But Arcanine going into Amoonguss here would make a lot of sense. So let's see if it's Amoonguss coming out.
Yeah,
there it
that's
is.
the case. That's the case, and I wonder if this Palafin went for Protect, because if it went for Protect or Jet Punch, it would be a very bad spot for Adi that went for Sucker Punch, I believe. With this Star Dark, you want to catch that Palafin on the offensive side, like with your King Gambit, finally, I would say. And let's see. Okay, it went for Wave Crash, so nice prediction here. But it is not quite enough, I would say. And Wave Crash, it's faster, so... Wow, we almost saw knockout! Oh no.
Wow.
And Wave Crash is going to probably close out this game since it takes the KO onto that King Gambit. And we are left with a 2 versus 3, but Zelda can recycle the Intimidate. So... Oof.
What a clutch survival there.
Yeah.
At first, I was going to be like, whose Palafin is faster? And like, once I saw how much Kowtow Cleave did, I really thought the Wave Crash from Adi's Palafin would just get the knockout. But no, it's bulky enough to survive just with the sliver of HP. And yeah, that's such a big deal, as you mentioned, because now the Intimidate can just, you know, further be cycled in and out. And so... you know, that was kind of what we were talking about earlier, right? Like, King Gambit ended up going for the Dark Terra, but because it didn't have that Defiant boost anymore, it just didn't do as much damage as you would have liked to see, right? And so it felt like Adi had been conserving this Terra the entire time, but there were two different positions I felt like where King Gambit could have started putting on a little bit more pressure immediately, but both times the Gambit kind of ended up switching out. You know, the second time around, it was that Protect. And so, yeah, you know, it's not completely over yet because of the Howl here, but it is really tricky at this point, especially because like the Palafin on the Adi side is of course exposed to potential Spore, but this is a great Protect.
Yeah, Protect, and I didn't put Howl into the equation for this endgame, but it's a great way to start dealing some true damage in this endgame. But yeah, Will-O-Wisp is a threat on Zelda's side, and Palafin has to go for a Jet Punch that it can't quite land on that Arcanine since Amoonguss is on the field, and it's not going to get KO'd by this Flare Blitz, because we have seen that Amoonguss taking like 70% damage by Flare Blitz at +0.
I like this idea. Okay, the double Protect.
Yeah.
This is a very high risk, high reward, but essentially if you get it, then, you know, the goal is the next turn you can just Flare Blitz, Wave Crash, maybe pick up a double knockout, and then just go from there. And so... yeah, I think, like you mentioned, Howl makes this a lot more interesting because of the fact that it can, you know, quickly increase your damage output. So, yeah, let's see. If I think Palafin doesn't get it and it eats up either a Will-O-Wisp or a Spore, it's going to be really tricky, especially if it gets put to sleep. But the upside is, yeah, like, there's not much damage from the opposing side. No double Protect here, though. Does not get it.
But, okay.
Ooh, okay.
So, yeah, we are going to see a Spore. I don't think this is a Poland buff. Yeah, but yeah, I think that double protect on Palafin was likely the win condition for Ari. Very, very more likely than the Flare Blitz crit on the Among Us. We're talking about like a 33% against a 4. So yeah, great rating, but unfortunately it didn't get it. So I would say
I do wonder,
lacks
like,
damage though.
Yeah, exactly. Like, Zelda does have to make a switch at some point, right? Like, and go into whatever the final Pokemon is here. And so it is kind of awkward because, like, one thing you might be worried about is, okay, let's say I make the switch and then, like, Adi just reads it and ends up, like, Flare Blitzing this turn, right? So this actually was maybe the potential turn to do it. But, yeah, it's going to be Flutter Mane there. And if it actually were Flare Blitz going out into that slot, I actually think maybe Adi would have just won from that position. So,
yeah, let's see. Okay, a third How in a row. And yeah, I don't think here Adi can rely too much on that one-turn wake-up. And I kind of forgot that Flutter Mane was in the lead. I'm going to be honest. Like,
I did too, yeah. This game has gone on for so long. Like, I think it's been like 20 minutes-ish or so. And so, yeah, like, this has been definitely one of the longest regulation C games I've seen. But basically what makes this position really tricky is that there's no Protect on the Arcanine, right? So you can just safely launch a Shadow Ball into that position. I'm mainly curious if Arcanine could potentially survive an attack from the Flutter. But yeah, if you get the knockout onto Arcanine here, it becomes really tricky, right? You could just go for Rage Powder plus the KO onto Arcanine. And so, yeah, I can see what Adi's going for here. Just try to knock out the Amoonguss and hope that the Palafin wakes up this turn.
Yeah, Rage Powder and goes after Extreme Speed being in the same priority bracket. And Palafin wakes up, so Jet Punch is not gonna be enough. It's only at +2, I believe, and that Amoonguss has showed that it's got a lot of physical defense. Yeah, Shadow Ball is enough, so that Flutter Mane is choice specs confirmed. And yeah, if Flare Blitz came out in this turn, we would have seen a different endgame probably.
I was also curious if Wave Crash there would get the KO, because if it does, then it's like Palafin against Flutter plus Arcanine. You do have this really powerful Jet Punch after all the Howl boost. So I'm also curious how, bulky the opposing Flutter is. But yeah, it felt like, this game, I honestly thought it was kind of over, like, especially after Gambit went down. But what actually made it awkward was, like, the Howl plus, like you called out, the kind of passive position of Zelda. And so Adi actually had maybe a bunch of different ways to have won this endgame, but it either starts with, like, reading Flare Blitz and reading the Arcanine switching out, or maybe Wave Crashing with Palafin in that position. But that was definitely a very long and drawn-out game one.
Yeah, and I expect to see a more offensive approach by Adi with his Kangambit, since it's the key in the mirror, and that's why, like, Luca Traegut began to use it and is so consistent with it. He also got, I think, top 4 or top 8 at the last Global Challenge. So he sticks with the Black Glasses though, while other players have switched to the Lumberry. And yeah, that is what makes you win the mirrors, especially if your opponent does not bring Tinglu.
Exactly, yeah. So I'm really glad you called both of those out, because to me, it's like Adi had multiple opportunities to, like, snowball the game pretty quickly with Kingambit, especially because, one, Zelda did not bring the Tinglu, right? So there's no resist, or the Roaring Moon, right? So it was actually, like, super, super good for Kingambit. And two, there were 2 different times where Kingambit got a Defiant boost, but both times the first time it switched out, the second time it protected. That haze from Zelda was really smart once again. Like, I thought really that turn kind of saved him in this battle, and then the play after as well. So yeah, I definitely would like to see Kingambit being utilized a little bit more here. And I think if you're Zelda, you're probably aware, okay, I won that game, but Kingambit is really scary. So I do think maybe you consider bringing at least one of Roaring Moon or Tinglu. One thing that's interesting here is kind of forcing Terra out of Kingambit earlier on, because if you do that, then the Flutter Mane can, like, Dazzling Gleam, for example, to hit it for super effective, since it's Dark Terra. And so yeah, I think it's weird. That first game felt like it didn't really center around Kingambit, but to me, that's actually still the most important Pokemon in the matchup here for Adi.
Yeah, I agree with you. And even if you force the Terra, you have to be aware with your Flutter Mane of that Sucker Punch. Since the Terra Dark deals a lot of damage to Flutter Mane, it's enough, like, I think a very, very little chip damage on that Flutter Mane for Sucker Punch to get a knockout. So you have to find yourself in a position with Amoonguss and Flutter Mane on the field together, I think. And I don't know if I would bring Tinglu or Roaring Moon. Probably Tinglu seems more solid, since, Roaring Moon has probably Acrobatics and Frog Chop, so you don't threaten that Kingambit that much. But let's see if Zelda made an adjustment in this game. I'm very curious.
Yeah, one thing that was interesting is I actually feel like the Terra like didn't end up being super meaningful from either player's end, right? Like both players kind of tried to use it offensively, and didn't get probably as much value as they would have hoped for. So I'm curious if like Terra usage ends up changing a little bit here, but Amoonguss definitely in a pretty good spot on this turn 1, right? And yeah, like Gambit here can pressure Swords Dance. I mean, it's a very similar position to what we had seen previously, but this time around there is just the Amoonguss out on the field immediately. So of course you could like protect into a Spore, but Zelda could make the double switch into Arcanine plus Amoonguss like we had kind of seen previously. And so, you know, part of the debate here is, do you continue to play passively and just go for the Spore? I do think this is pretty safe, because even if you were to double switch here, you would at least get the Defiant boost from the Intimidate from Arcanine. But okay, Swords Dance, that's why I like it.
Yeah, I like the Swords Dance, since if you go for the passive play and you get a double switch on the opposing side, you are threatened by like Will-O-Wisp and Spore. There are 2 status, and Lumber is not going to be enough. But we see a Terra type on turn 1 once again, and it is the Palafin once again. So Zelda likes the baby Palafin, and let's see if it went double up onto that Kingambit. It could be, it could be very, very bad.
Yeah, oh my gosh.
And there is a drop, but I don't think it matters.
No.
Wave Crash.
Oh my gosh, wow.
And that's a first turn KO on the Pokemon that is the key in the matchup. So I would like to see how Adi is planning on playing this out.
That Moonblast honestly did so much damage. Like I don't even know if the Water Terror on Palafin was necessary to get the KO. But I get it. You want to just ensure it. So that definitely makes sense. But yeah, definitely a very different game from game 1 where game 1 Adi kind of plays safe to respect the Palafin Terra. This time around tries to go aggressive, and Zelda calls it correctly, and gets a big lead here. But the game is still very far from over. Like the reality here is that Fluttermane from Adi's end is very well positioned. The Fluttermane on the opposing side has to take a guaranteed turn of sleep. Amoonguss is still exerting a ton of pressure with Rage Powder or Spore here, and of course Adi still has his Terra conserved as well. And so definitely can see him pulling off a comeback, but it's going to start with, I think, like predicting an Amoonguss or an Arcanine to switch in here, and switching Amoonguss out into Arcanine here is a great play for Adi.
Yeah, and Fluttermane is a great adjustment by Adi, since he noticed that he cannot lead with Palafin. He has to bring the Kingambit on the lead, and Fluttermane in the back is a more reliable source of damage. So this is going to come into play right now with a bit of lag. Yeah, okay. But and that drop is huge. Because right now Shadow Ball can take a KO.
Yeah, it looks super close, but the fact is that without that drop, Amoonguss is definitely surviving the next turn, barring a critical hit. With that drop, things get significantly scarier here. And one thing that's interesting here, once again, is that Zelda did commit the Terra immediately on turn 1, but it didn't feel like it was necessary. So now you can't defensively Terra Fluttermane, for example, to get around this. And Flutter's only taken 1 turn of sleep so far as well. So I think basically what Adi is angling for here is, do you expect Amoonguss to protect? If not, you could, of course, just launch the Flare Blitz into that slot. Looks like he is going to expect the protect or the switch here, and Amoonguss indeed does go for the switch, possibly back out into Arcanine. Yeah,
so great call here by Adi. I'm not sure if that this double up onto that Fluttermane with the spread move is going to be enough, considering this Arcanine just went at -1 thanks to that Arcanine switch in. And Fluttermane sleeps 2 turns, and this is pretty good for Adi, not taking a Moonblast in this turn, but that is not enough. And I think this favors Adi, actually, since right now he doesn't have a free switch, your opponent.
Yeah, exactly. I think one thing that if you have to consider, if you're Adi, is kind of how do I get enough damage onto the Arcanine over the long run, right? Because you've got your own Arcanine, you've got Amoonguss, you've got Fluttermane. None of those can quickly knock out Arcanine, and you do have to worry about Flare Blitz from the opposing Arcanine slowly KOing, or not slowly, but just knocking out Fluttermane. So I think at this point from Zelda's end, the Arcanine's going to be the most important Pokemon, and the Protect here kind of just to scout out for a potential switch, but it of course does allow Fluttermane to burn another turn of sleep, and it does not wake up, does just burn another sleep turn.
Yes, sleeps full 3 turns, and this Howl is going to bring back that Arcanine at +0. He wants to grant himself some good damage onto the switch-ins that may come out on Zelda's side in these next turns, or even just some good damage on that Arcanine.
Yeah, I like the idea of Howling here because it's like, you know that your Flutter is going to outspeed the opposing Flutter anyway, so a Dazzling Gleam will KO it. And basically, like, the question I was asking earlier is, well, okay, how are you actually going to deal enough damage to knock out Arcanine in the long run? Well, if you keep Howling, you get to a point where, like, Flare Blitz and Extreme Speed actually do really significant damage to it, so definitely can understand that option. Of course, Audi still has Terra available to him as well. One thing he is going to have to worry about later on in the game, of course, is Palafin, but, one of the things you can do is, of course, Terra Grass against the Palafin. Now, if you Terra Grass, you do open yourself, however, to being weak to the Flare Blitz from the opposing Arcanine, so it's kind of this awkward position, but Flutter doesn't switch out here, doesn't go for, can't protect here, and so it's just going to feint to Dazzling Gleam.
Yep. And I think that what Adi he's doing right now is, like, you want to boost that Arcanine as much as you can to KO that Arcanine as fast as you can, and you can Terra your Arcanine to survive that Palafin, and you might want to do that right now, since this recoil from Flare Blitz put that Arcanine in range of Extreme Speed. So that's very interesting approach to this matchup, and I think Adi is in a favorable position even if he lost King Gambit on turn 1.
I definitely agree, yeah, and I think part of it is kind of how he's positioned the Arcanine in particular here. I honestly think Howl is such a game changer in this matchup. I think things would look a lot differently if Howl didn't exist on this set, but being able to kind of mitigate the opposing Intimidate drops and also further increase your damage output is honestly really significant here. And so, yeah, part of it is, like, I think if you knock out the Arcanine, then Grass Terra Arcanine should really just win this game, right? And so, yeah, exactly. The idea is go for the Terra here. You have the Extreme Speed. You've got the boost. The only way this can backfire is if the Arcanine were to actually survive and then, like, Flare Blitz you in return. But Arcanine now on Audi's end very well positioned. And so this honestly been a really fun set just because I feel like both games, like, one player kind of had a lead, but then the other player was able to kind of claw back into it.
Yeah, and I'm interested in this Flower Main staying on the field. I personally would have gone for Amoonguss on that slot. And that Arcanine survives, though. So he didn't go for Flare Blitz, though. And Moonblast is going to deal a chunk of damage to that Palafin. And staying on the field pays off. Wave Crash doubling up onto that Arcanine. So, ooh. Real close, but being that
was a crazy
fast,
turn. Yeah.
Being faster is a game changer here.
Exactly, yeah. I'm thinking of all the things that happened, right? It's like Arcanine survives, but it doesn't Flare Blitz. Fluttermane doesn't go for Dazzling Gleam. Instead it Moonblast. Palafin survives into Wave Crash. Like so many different things could have happened there. But yeah, now, like, you do have the Extreme Speed once again. And man, this was such a close game. I think this turn in particular, like, there's so many things that could have basically played out, but the way it did, I think it favors Audi more in the end.
Yeah, and I think of 4 Pokemons on the field, we have like 80 HP in total.
Yeah.
Extreme Speed here coming onto that Palafin and crashing onto that Protect. But here, the Arcanine on Zelda's side is going to pick up the KO on this Terra Grass Arcanine. And I want to say that an obstacle has been, killed by Zelda, but I don't think that's the obstacle right now. Because you have a Flowermane here with Amoonguss on his side, and Amoonguss can heal the Flowermane to win the game. And Amoonguss can as well win the 1v1 against the opposing Amoonguss since it has the Citrus Berry. So,
oh my goodness. I'm just thinking, like, we're probably going to end up in an Amoonguss versus Amoonguss
but
game here.
I feel like Zelda is wise enough to forfeit in that case.
Well, let's see. It is the finals. You're up 1 game here as well. So, yeah, Dazzling Gleam makes sense. And, of course, you can go for... This is interesting, right? Because it's like Rage Powder is so obvious. Do you ever predict, Zelda to just go for, like, Wave Crash instead on the Amoonguss? And then you, of course, could try to greed this Pollen Puff. But... yeah, I do think last turn, like, Audi had the ability to maybe go for Extreme Speed onto the Arcanine from Zelda's end, especially since Palafin protected. But, of course, like, I don't know the team sheets here. I don't know if Zelda has Protect on the Arcanine. I don't know if we saw that earlier, but you could be reading into like a Amoonguss switching, for example, or Arcanine protecting there and Palafin attacking instead. Palafin's gonna go for the double here.
Yeah, Zelda identified the same win condition that Ari identified in game 1. So
yep, exactly.
they think alike, and Dazzling Gleam here is going to bring that Palafin down. And yeah, as I said before, Amoonguss on Ari's side has the Citrus Berry intact and can easily win this 1v1 if it ends up being a 1v1. Yeah, it's kind of a 1v1 since Fluttermane is going to sleep. But, Amoonguss can heal it. Depends on the speed here, obviously. But I would say this game is pretty ended with Ari winning.
Yeah, it certainly feels like Adi's got the, especially with that being a Spore rather than just a KO. And okay, Amoonguss is faster, so that's definitely going to be game over then.
Yeah. And I've seen some people, actually, you know what? I just recognized this team on Adi's side, and it is the team that Nails and Yuri and Samvi brought to London. So if that's the case, that Amoonguss is fast, like with some EVS and speed. So that is trained correctly to like reach these endgame states and win. Or
that makes total sense.
Even just in the mirrors, And like I faced Yuri at UIC, and after the match, I lost 2-0, and he asked me, "How fast are you on Amoonguss?" And I told him like I don't know, like 26 IVs, I don't know. And he told me, "Okay, I'm 20 EVS." I was like, why? I was like, why the hell?
Yeah. Let's that was such an interesting matchup because going into game 2, we were like King Gambit, and then Zelda actually dealt with it accordingly. But huge mix-up here was the Fluttermane adjustment, as you called out.
Yep.
One thing that was a big deal was getting that special defense drop onto Amoonguss, right? So that was obviously some good fortune for Adi. But Fluttermane is a really, really big deal here as it's able to put on a lot of offensive pressure. So yeah, curious about the adjustments here because I like. Adi didn't even get anything off with King Gambit in that last game. He was still able to win. I think from Zelda's perspective, if you were to go Flutter and Palafin again and go into the same lead, this time around, at least that you don't need to Terra your Palafin to guarantee the knockout onto King Gambit. So I think like one thing Zelda can consider more in this matchup is, Terra specifically, right? Like, can you get more value out of your Terra? Because I felt like Palafin Water Terra didn't really wasn't super instrumental in either games 1 or 2. And a good defensive Terra, for example, could be really valuable for him. And so, yeah, what's interesting is we get to see team preview here, and Adi's actually opting to drop Fluttermane once again. And so, yeah, that's definitely a bold gamble, but I like it.
Yeah, and Palafin coming into this game once again, I'm not sure it's on the lead, right?
I actually didn't catch it. I thought it was in the back once again, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, if it's in the back, I mean, he might end up doing the same mistake as game 1. And I don't know if I agree with Palafin in the back. I talked with Marco Fierro about this, and he agrees that Palafin in the back is fine as long as you have something to haze. But Adi's Palafin has Drain Punch, so that is not the case at all. And yeah, you have more... Like, it's more hard to position it to proc this ability if you have it in the back, of course.
Yeah, I think to me, I'm wondering if Adi basically is predicting Zelda to play towards Ting Lu. Ting Lu hasn't made an appearance. Or Roaring Moon, okay.
Yeah.
And we are going to see an adjustment here, and there is lead Palafin.
Yeah, Palafin is on the lead. So both Palafins and Roaring Moon activating the booster energy with the attack boost. And Amoonguss is not safe here. And even if Arcanine comes on the field, I feel like it has to be very careful.
Yeah, I think like lead Amoonguss is just, it does exert offensive pressure with Spore, but you do have to respect like what acrobatics, for example, from the Roaring Moon from the opposing side. So that's one thing to consider. I think right now Adi's Palafin's obviously in kind of a weird spot, but you of course could stay in here and predict, for example, Zelda to switch in Arcanine and just go for a wave crash, right? Like, I think that's one thing that's just so huge with how people play with Palafin, but yeah, with Arcanine in the back here, I think that's such a safe switch in here. So yeah, I think this time around Roaring Moon is an interesting adjustment, but after turn 1, it's kind of in a weird spot here, especially if it ends up like, just attacking. So yeah.
Yeah. And Arcanine comes on the field to intimidate both Zelda's Pokemons. I expect that... No, I just have to shut up, because that Palafin stays on the field once again. And
oh my gosh. Okay, stop
this time,
this time though. Yeah.
This time the third type is going to be the Roaring Moon. You know, the Acrobatics has a lot more value if you go for the Terra Flying. And Jet Punch calling out that Arcanine switching. Okay. And Acrobatics, okay, if it doubled up, I'm not sure it even KOs. And it doesn't.
Oh!
So Arcanine stays alive. I'm not sure for how long, since 22 HP is not the best scenario you want your Arcanine to be in. But yeah, you can for sure use Intimidate once again.
Yeah, this turn's actually really interesting because, of course, there was the ability to, like, you know, go for, like, side Pollen Puff, expecting Amoonguss on the other side to protect or switch out. But I also really like this King Gambit switching. You've gotten the Intimidate off. There's not that much offensive pressure from the opposing side. You know, we were talking about how important Gambit is in this matchup. Funnily enough, I feel like it's barely done anything in games 1 and 2, but I feel like this is the best position that Audi has had throughout the entire set to finally get it out. And, you know, even a single Swords Dance, especially with the Terra committed now on Roaring Moon, like, you go for a Swords Dance, Dark Terra and Kowtow Cleave should just start knocking out, like, everything, basically. And so, yeah, I like the decision to conserve the Arcanine here. It's not really that risky. Like, Palafin can't do that much to be a -1 Wave Crash in baby form, non-Terra at worst, right? And so, like the idea to finally get King Gambit out here.
Yeah, and let's see if, once again, King Gambit comes in with the Arcanine on the opposite side coming in as well. And Palafin switches out, and Arcanine comes in. So yeah, I don't want to say that you jinxed it, but like, this King Gambit is in the right position right now. But it was in the right position.
Please, just attack this time, or just stay on the field. Like, I think Adia's got it exactly the setup that he really wants here. So yeah, you know, like, it's immune to the Spore, but Gambit is in a very, very nice spot now. Now, you know, it is a little bit scary if Roaring Moon, like, wakes up, but the Terra is committed. This is such a good switch into Palafin. The other big thing about Roaring Moon going for, you know, that flying Terra is now, like, Jet Punch is so strong to Arcanine and Roaring Moon. Don't have to worry about resistances or defensive Terras. And so, yeah, I think the main debate throughout this course of this set has been like, okay, what do I do with King Gambit, right? Do I Swords Dance? Do I Kowtow Cleave? Do I go for Dark Terra? And here it's not going to be a Terra, and Roaring Moon's actually going to swap out as well, trying to conserve it for a little bit longer, and Amoonguss being the switch in here.
Yeah, and Roaring Moon switching out, being at -1, and having slept at least one turn, so it did his mandatory turn of sleep. Palafin comes on the field, so that Arcanine is free to go for a Flare Blitz. That is going to deal some good damage. And it is not the choice, though. Will-O-Wisp to burn that Lumberry, and Amoonguss and Arcanine are both free to go for their status condition right now. But let's see if the King Gambit went for Kowtow Cleave onto that Amoonguss, and it did. And it's a lot of damage since it's a +1. I just forgot it. So Citrus Berry being procced here, and Amoonguss is still in a good spot, considering that, yeah, King Gambit is threatened by the status conditions.
Yeah, honestly, I think there I would have liked to see, like, a Dark Terra, Kowtow Cleave maybe into Arcanine. Because if you get the knockout onto Arcanine, man, like, the King Gambit is just so well positioned from there, right? But I can understand the idea of just trying to get damage there. And also, if you commit your Dark Terra, then you can't Terra anything else. One thing to note, actually, that I didn't realize was this is Grass Terra Palafin. So that actually makes a big difference here.
Yeah.
Amoonguss can't redirect any attacks away from it afterwards, and so that actually changes how I was thinking about this pretty significantly. Now I can see why Audi was going for that play. It's really safe, and Palafin now is going to be really well positioned, although it does risk a Will-O-Wisp, of course.
Yeah, so we see the Terra type Grass in this very turn, and it would be very not cool for Audi if Arcanine went for Flare Blitz into this slot, considering that I strongly believe that Arcanine can live a single Jet Punch at +1, at +0. But you know what? We don't have to worry about that, because Palafin is faster. And that's one-hit knockout. So we saw this Palafin being faster than the opposing Palafin previously, but not faster than the Arcanine. I'm sorry, this just surprised me.
That's not common at all. That's for sure.
No.
So that is really, really interesting. Ends up being Spore into the Gambit. The Gambit there had the opportunity to maybe go for a Kowtow Cleave, but yeah, I mean, the position right now is incredible for Audi, right? Like, this Grass Terra is such a big deal because now the Amoonguss is in such a bad spot. Palafin here can haze away the Swords Dance boost at least, right? And so this current position's a little bit awkward, where it's like, you're not doing that much damage. You could wave crash into either Pokemon, but then Amoonguss could heal back with Regenerator. You can Pollen Puff the opposing Palafin as well. But, right now, I'd be very happy in Adi's position relative to Zelda's, and I think Zelda definitely has an uphill battle in front of him.
Yeah, and if you're Adi, I think that if you leave Palafin on the field, you want to target down that Amoonguss, because you have to target down the healer. Probably. Because if you go for Wave Crash onto Palafin, it's like the damage you take as recoil is more than the damage you deal, since there is Pollen Puff on the field. But yeah, Palafin switches out for that Amoonguss to come in, and Wave Crash, even without the Terra type, deals a lot of damage since Palafin is just not balanced, and Kingambit slips his first turn. And so it being at +3 is not that much of a deal for Adi. For Zelda.
Yeah, that Pollen Puff honestly did pretty significant damage to this Kingambit. So if it stays asleep for another turn, especially without a side Pollen Puff, the Gambit can just faint. And so that Swords Dance earlier maybe felt a little bit greedy. I get what Adi was going for, though, because essentially I think if the Amoonguss had protected there, or launched Spore into the Palafin slot, and you get the Gambit is at +3, Gambit should just sweep the game from that position. But yeah, it's really interesting. I feel like I expected Gambit to be the MVP of this matchup, and it's actually put in so much less work than I had expected it to. But I think it's a testament to Zelda making smart plays around it, And so Roaring Moon is back out. It is asleep, and here's just Jet Punch, no Rage Powder, so Gambit is out of the way. But we know that there is the Spore coming out from Amoonguss.
Yeah, so Zelda in this turn just KO'd Kingambit, but at what cost? I mean, that Palafin going to sleep is very, very bad for his position, I feel like. And yeah, Adi is going to bring in his own Arcanine, probably hoping for a 2-turn sleep onto that Roaring Moon to go for a side Pollen Puff. And that is kind of key. I think this turn is very important.
Yeah, this turn is absolutely huge. I was wondering, do you risk the side Pollen Puff? Because by going for this, if the Roaring Moon actually wakes up right now, it's a complete disaster. Yeah. But if it ends up just staying asleep for one more turn here, Arcanine's going to be very well positioned in this end game, especially because you can boost your attack with Howl, and you'll still have redirection with Amoonguss to, protect the Arcanine from those Palafin attacks. And so I think this turn is absolutely critical right now.
Yeah, so Adi is taking his time to think about it. So, yeah, he's not going to go for a Pollen Puff, and he's doing another kind of play that revolves around that Roaring Moon sleeping another turn, so he wants to get on the field as many boosts as possible, since the opposing Arcanine is no more a threat. It's dead by that Wave Crash being faster. So this Howl is huge, but that Roaring Moon is huger. And Acrobatics onto Arcanine. Okay. I think Palafin can handle this endgame. It all depends on a few calcs. I don't know if this Jet Punch at +1 can KO that Roaring Moon, but it is kind of full health, I think. So I don't think so.
The speeds in this set have really tripped me up. We had Adi's Arcanine being, or Palafin outspeeding the opposing Palafin and Arcanine, and then here we saw Arcanine get the Howl off before Roaring Moon was able to even attack, right? So, because if Roaring Moon's just faster there and you wake up, you don't get the Howl, you faint, you're in really bad shape. That's how I thought the turn was going to play out. But then I was like, oh, Roaring Moon woke up, but it was slower anyway. So you at least get the Howl off, which makes a really, really big difference here. Yeah. So, man, this is going to be so close.
Yeah. And it depends on Palafin spread, because if it is 1 point slower than your own Arcanine, it's going to be probably faster than the opposing Roaring Moon. But that is not a thing I would like to find out in this turn if I was Adi. So protect from that Roaring Moon, and it looks like Adi is pretty confident on the speed tiers, and that protect is just going to stall out a turn of sleep from Zelda's own Palafin, and Adi is going to use that turn to heal the Palafin with the game-changing Terra type, I would say.
Yeah, I think the idea was to hope to wake up with Palafin, get the haze off, so you get rid of the attack drop on your end. And so, yeah, Roaring Moon switching to Amoonguss here is really safe. Because, as soon as you get a single haze off, then the opposing Palafin's damage output is reduced. And one thing that's really big for Zelda now is that you can go for Pollen Puff onto the opposing Palafin to also actually deal... Oh my gosh, that did so much damage.
That is usually the damage.
Oh, it stays asleep!
And that is huge. But no, okay, it's not that huge considering it was covered by Ari with a Spore. But I'm concerned. Like, is Wave Crash a role on that Amoonguss? Because you have not the Terra type water.
Right. Yeah,
So-
like, basically what I was thinking is, okay, like, if you wake up there, at least you get the haze off, so then the Wave Crash can't knock out the Amoonguss. You know, it looks like, you know, that first one did, like, I don't know, 55, 60%, and Amoonguss protects! Oh, and we know where Adi is targeting right now. Oh,
So,
my goodness.
The game is just dying. It's lagging so much, the recording, I don't know. But yeah, Wave Crash on that slot deals a lot of damage, and Palafin going for the haze. I wonder if this is too late, or if Zelda just got rid of this boost on time. But Spore, once again, going onto that Palafin, and yeah, so Adi's Palafin is going to have some free turns to deal damage, and that Amoonguss on Adi's side is faster. So we know there might be a double up.
Oh my goodness, this is so intense. Yeah,
Yeah.
like you could double up. You could also go for Pollen Puff to heal yourself back up, and of course the Grass Terror protects you from Spore on the opposing end. It does not, however, protect you from Pollen Puff, which will actually deal super effective damage.
Yeah.
My main question in this endgame is basically from Zelda's POV, Roaring Moon Acrobatics, right? What's the damage calc with that onto either Amoonguss or Palafin? And, you know, do you go who do you Pollen Puff essentially, right? Because maybe you Pollen Puff Amoonguss, hope to chip away at it, so then Roaring Moon comes out and can just KO with Acrobatics. So here we go. It's going to be a Wave Crash to KO the Palafin to start this one.
Yeah, so Palafin leaves the field for the last time in this BO3, and I wonder if that Amoonguss, like, how much damage is it going to deal? Because I'm not used to this calc. And I think, okay, this is a lot.
Whoa.
Okay.
Yeah, that is a lot.
That is a lot, and it sets up the Roaring Moon endgame. Even if you don't have the, you know, the booster energy boost anymore, so you're going to deal maybe less damage than you expect, and it is not going to be enough to KO the Amoonguss for sure. So we might see some mind games for Protect.
Yeah, I think this turn is so critical, right? It's like who protects and who do you predict, right? It's like Palafin here could Wave Crash into Roaring Moon, then maybe finish it off with the Jet Punch. But, you know, then it's like, does Amoonguss go for Rage Powder, for example? You could, like, protect Palafin and Spore, but that seems incredibly risky. There's, of course, yeah, the Rage Powder Wave Crash here. Play feels relatively safe. I'm curious if, yeah, Roaring Moon protects. Amoonguss goes for Pollen Puff onto this Amoonguss and then try to KO with Acrobatics next turn.
Yeah. And once again, it seems like Ari is very confident on the speed tiers, on his Palafin being faster than that Roaring Moon, and, you know, if you're preparing against Zelda, you are probably aware of, ooh, and this is a crit. And this is a crit. It's very important. And
wow.
if Wave Crash KOs, Ari still wins. But if Wave Crash KOs, I'm not sure of it.
I'd be surprised without the Water Turret, but I'm honestly not sure. Like, I want to say the Roaring Moon is bulky here, right? It was slower than Arcanine from the opposing end, but that critical hit complicates things significantly for Adi, I think, because, yeah, like, now it means you faint from recoil. So, the upside, this is interesting, right? It's Pollen Puff, it's not Rage Powder here, and it's okay, it's Wave Crash to start. Does it KO?
No!
Oh!
And that was very close, though.
Wow.
The Terra type Grass was so important in this game to avoid, you know, the Spore, the Rage Powder, but it means you don't deal as much damage as you would do with the Terra Water, and that closes out the game.
Wow.
So this is an... Okay, I just don't know the calcs then. Okay.
Yeah, I thought maybe Amoonguss could survive, but yeah. Wow.
What a set. What a set. I'm not ready to cast two more.
That was honestly wild. Like, I knew it was gonna be, you know, back and forth, but that was not like. I think a lot of the text came in handy throughout the course of the set, right? Like, Roaring Moon ends up clutching this game 3 when Zelda didn't bring it in games 1 or 2. This Palafin with the Grass Terra ended up being so huge, you know, kind of in the mid game. Critical hit, of course, onto the Palafin as well.